Yes, well, Senator Hollie Hughes is a Liberal Party senator for the state of New South Wales, and we haven't had her on for some weeks now, and we've missed her. I've had emails from listeners saying, when is she on? Is she on today? And I keep saying, no, she's away. She's doing things. She's been very busy, including going to her own honeymoon, because I would have thought, Hollie Hughes, some politicians might miss out on going to their own honeymoon.
I did have a lovely honeymoon. It was beautiful, but I have been away. It's been a bit up and down. I lost my mum and I got married. So it's been a bit four weddings and a funeral coupled with the referendum, but back to Parliament and getting on with the show.
A bittersweet period for you. Our sympathies on losing your mum, who no doubt was very proud of what you're achieving in the Parliament, and congratulations on the marriage. And, of course, no doubt you're rested after a honeymoon, are you?
Look, it was absolutely stunning. I wasn't quite sure how I'd go because I'm not very good at turning off, but it was surprising how easily I did just slip into the lie by the pool life for a few days. It was lovely, but came back on Saturday. I got off the plane, had a shower, put the no T-shirt on, and out we went to a polling booth. So no rest for the wicked.
So no wins, but what a diabolical way to run a referendum for the Yes campaign. They were all inhaling the red dirt and didn't think they had a dead duck product to sell, but they did, didn't they?
Oh, look, it was just extraordinary. And can I say, Chris, it continues to be extraordinary with the vitriol that's still being spewed by those that were on the Yes side of the campaign. They are still behaving with this unbelievable sanctimony and just sense of superiority of everybody that voted no. I mean, we expect this sort of behaviour from the Greens, but it's certainly continuing from the ALP as well. They are just treating Australians, and now a significant portion of Australians, with complete disdain. It's really quite disgusting.
This rubbish about we won't accept a no, and thinking that, well, hang on a second, how could anyone vote no? Almost as if they were far too arrogant and contained in their own yes elite bubble to realise what the people think about these issues.
Well, and the fact that rural and regional areas overwhelmingly voted no, most Indigenous communities voted no. It's a complete insult that these inner city elites continue to lecture Australians that somehow they got it wrong when they voted no. I think they got it completely right. I think Australians knew exactly what they were doing. This was risky. It was unknown. There was no details. But it also would have permanently put race into our constitution and created a sense of victimhood. I know on Saturday night when I was speaking to a group of the volunteers that had helped the No campaign, I mean, I lived in rural and regional Australia for a long time, and I had a pretty bad car accident, and I know that what I could access healthcare-wise after that car accident, and it didn't matter what colour I was, it didn't matter what socioeconomic group I belonged to, I got exactly the same care as an Indigenous Australian or anybody else that lived in that remote community. And so for me, it really comes down to geography, not race. There's plenty of Indigenous Australians who are actually doing very well, who live in metropolitan areas. And we know that, you know, even those voice architects and proponents, they are not disadvantaged. They are not struggling. They would all be on very good incomes living in metropolitan areas with the same access to healthcare, schools, roads, everything else that all other Australians in that area access. But if you go out to rural and regional areas, it's very, very different in the services levels. So it really does come down to geography, not race, and Australians have got it right.
I've said time and time again that we need an audit of all Indigenous programs and bureaucracy. Your party wants an audit. We're reading today that Labor won't have a bar of an audit. They don't want to learn the truth, but they do want some truth-telling and treaty. They're still on about that. Gary John said to me yesterday, one of the key No campaigners, he said, watch out, they won't let this go.
No, and to listen to Albanese at the moment is just, I mean, it's really quite pathetic. He looks like a broken man, but the fact that every poll was telling them that they were going to lose, that at no point have they sat down and had a bit of a kitchen cabinet meeting and sort of said, well, what are we going to do if this thing goes down? What are we saying? We said we wanted to, instill those three pillars of voice, truth-telling and treaty. What are we going to say to the Australian people if they vote no to the voice? What is our answer? And he still doesn't have one. I think it's just continuing this deceptiveness that they've run the whole campaign by not being upfront with Australians, not legislating it, not putting legislation forward so that people knew what they were going to get. And it's just this trickery continuing. But certainly when it comes to the audit, we have put out motions looking for an audit into the land councils in particular. And in fact, Lydia Thorpe and I have an interesting history. But one day, as I started the speech, Satan was skiing to work, because Lydia Thorpe and I were on the same page, as we were both pushing for this inquiry into the land councils. But the Greens with Labor and Senator Pocock all voted it down.
Just extraordinary. I want to take Penny's call, who's phoned through on our talkback lines on this subject. Go ahead, Penny.
Yes, good afternoon, Chris. How are you?
Very well, thank you. You're from the Horizons Foundation too, right? Which was where Anita works with, and she rang at this time yesterday on the subject.
Yes. So Australian Horizons Foundation is based in far north Queensland. So we have a large reach right across the rural sector across this country, because that's where the need for support is.
Yeah, you've got something to say about what we need to do about disadvantage in Indigenous communities.
Well, I think disadvantage exists across particularly the far north and the more remote and rural areas right across Australia. And it has a lot to do with the population numbers and the allocation of resources. So it's expensive to deliver services across remote and rural areas. We understand that, but that doesn't diminish the need for being able to access health, education, mental health support, business support. So there's a whole raft of areas that people out in the regions, and we must remember that it's the regions that actually generate the wealth of this nation. It's the people working out in the regions and the remote and rural areas that actually make it possible, I guess, for the administrative centres, which are primarily on the coastline, to be able to, I guess, function. So I think there does need to be a recognition of that, and there also needs to be reinvestment in those areas. And that includes all the remote communities, because there's a wealth of knowledge, expertise, skills and capacity within all those areas that actually needs to be tapped into, recognised and enhanced.
But we need people in charge of programs who can make things happen, not sit there and start counting money and taking taking the cream off the top.
But so I think it's an issue across all sectors, is about delivery efficiency and appropriate resourcing. So and while we recognise and acknowledge, it is expensive to deliver services, the further you are away from regional and major centres and metropolitan areas, the cost escalates. Of course, the cost of fuel, the cost of transport, the cost of staffing, accommodation, transport of food and, equipment, certainly, does add to the bill. But it's about I really think it's about place-based investment to get the greatest return and the greatest efficiencies. And there's people on the ground that are very, very capable of doing that. I think what happens is there's a lot of money allocated sort of, within, the major centres, and by the time it trickles down to where it's needed to go, there's a lot's been. It's a bit like electricity supply. A lot gets lost along the line.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Jenny, thank you very much for calling in. I want to get back to Hollie Hughes now. Hollie, this is the problem. I spoke with Ken Duncan, the landscape photographer, when you were away. He's been running a foundation for 22 years, and he says we need to get rid of and weed out about 50% of the bureaucracy, because this is what takes so long to get things done.
And most of them are based in the cities. So they're getting money to run programs for Indigenous communities out in remote areas, yet they're based in city areas. There is so many programs and so much waste. Far north Queensland, if you look at the volume of money that has been delivered to Noel Pearson's organisation up in Cape York, yet what are the outcomes? And someone put an estimate on of over $500 million he has received. Yet, what are the results? We're still seeing huge disadvantage up there. We're still seeing huge issues when it comes to domestic violence, when it comes to drug and alcohol abuse, when it comes to children not attending school. Those issues are still existing, yet over $500 million has been pumped into it. I mean, there needs to be some accountability here. These are taxpayer dollars. These are yours and mine and, all your listeners' dollars going into these programs. We all want to see better outcomes and better results for all Australians, yet the fact that the Labor Party is continuing to block any inquiry into these funding mechanisms and how they may or may not be being rorted is just extraordinary.
I've got Senator Hollie Hughes with me right now. To the Israel-Hamas conflict, Hollie, I think we have just witnessed the self-sabotage of the Greens forever and selected Teals who would not agree to condemn Hamas's barbaric attacks 10 days ago in Israel. As the parliament overwhelmingly backed the motion. Hamas is a terrorist organisation, for heaven's sake, which has just carried out a horrifying series of terror attacks. And you've got these Teal Greens. Like, imagine what those who got sucked into voting for them would think after what's gone on in the last 24 hours.
Certainly the 1,500 Jewish people that reside in Kylea Tink's seat probably aren't happy with her at the moment. I mean, it is just disgusting. I mean, the behaviour is appalling. We expect it from the Greens. I mean, they are just absolutely vile at the best of times. But, the fact that these two Teals supported a motion that referred to Israel and war crimes, and yet Sophie Scomp's is out here trying to walk it back today that she stands with Israel. Well, she doesn't stand with Israel. She backed a motion that referred to war crimes. Yeah. I mean, the whole situation in Gaza has been brought on by Hamas. Hamas is who attacked Israel on the weekend on a public holiday at one of their holiest times of the year. This was a deliberate act by Hamas to attack Israel. I've just noticed I've got bells going, so if I have to go in a second. But look, it's disgusting. They are disgusting. I've just called them out in the Senate. What was interesting was one of the Labor senators who spoke just after me, came very, very close to speaking in favour of the Palestinians and what's been going on. I mean, it's appalling, Chris. I can't tell you. I have to go. But I promise I'll talk to you next week.
That's okay, Hollie. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. See, this is one of the problems sometimes when we have politicians on the program. When they're in Parliament, sometimes they're called in for various votes and the bells go and they have to rush in and they've got a limited time to get behind those doors. Otherwise, their vote won't count. And sometimes these decisions can go the wrong way. But, you've got all sorts of things going on in the parliament, but the fact that you would be supportive of the Palestinian people doesn't automatically mean you cannot condemn Hamas. If you're a human being who cares for human life, surely it's imperative on you as a leader of your community, and I'm talking about these members of parliament, newly elected members of parliament, they need to stand up for their people. And she's right. Some of these people have Jewish constituents, 1,500 Jewish constituents in the seat of North Sydney, which is a seat run by Kylea Tink. It's actually a seat that I reside in. And the overall impression that I have received from people that I've spoken to where I live is an absolute horrific reaction to what went on 10 days ago, as you would expect. But that doesn't mean you need to dump the Palestinian people and think that you can no longer support their fight for statehood. No, it's terror that we need to condemn very loudly. And I think we need to start separating quickly the terror intentions of the Hamas terrorist group with those of the Palestinian people.